We're getting started at 8:07 p.m. And the items on our agenda for today, we have two updates on policies and regulations for sick leave and school threat assessment teams. And we're going to be discussing later on the regulations for discussing the changes to the grading system. So to start with the sick leave, there's legislation that was signed on July 3rd. That addressed sick leave for school district employees. These revisions became effective on July 3rd, 2023, and required the development of new policy and regulation guides 1642.01 to address these new provisions. So maybe we can talk about that one first.
Sure.
Is there anything?
Basically what had happened, I'm just going to summarize it if I may, because I was working directly with Ms. Christie, who is our Director of Human Resources. What happened was it was passed through and stated that the way they look at the verbiage. So you have 10 sick day bank,
Right.
and of the 10 sick day bank, you have 3 personal days within the sick day bank. And then you have 3, that means if it rolls over. And then you have also family sick time. So I think the comment was they wanted to be able to extend, not give more days necessarily, but extend the utilization. So for example, if you're not sick, but your child is sick and you have no more sick days left, of course you're gonna take if you don't have, pardon me, I said it backwards. If you have sick days left, but your child is sick and you've utilized, you have a baby, they could be sick for 7 days in a row. So you've utilized your 3, you wanna be able to utilize them. Well, we've never micromanaged to really look, but we have a lot of people, I wanna say very positively, that really are by the book and utilize the verbiage. They would actually go to take a day without pay because they weren't sick and they wanted to be appropriate. So what this has done is this has broadened the understanding. We talk a lot about social, we talk a lot about mental health, emotional health. You know, you need to have a day. I took a sick day today because I needed to be mentally well and I needed to be away from the environment of work. So what has happened is they come out with this, it was actually approved, as you read. So it is our recommendation to adopt it. And as you'll know, both the policy and regulation 1642.01 is not mandatory. But it makes sense if we're going to follow it and we're going to do it, then policy and regulation should follow.
So it's new, it's not replacing anything.
Well, the 1642.01, it's just extending the verbiage of of foreseeable leave, number of days. She was like going over the specifics with me because I was asking her, has she been able to implement it in our system? Because we use ASAP. And she said, yeah, we're figuring out a way. She said there are some cap in the language. You can ask for a note on certain days. We even had this conversation, unfortunately, about bereavement leave. You can extend it, utilizing some of your sick days for bereavement. So it really, a lot of my colleagues were not necessarily in favor of it. Personally, I wish we could just say, you have 10 days and you have 10 days, because it is their days. But it gives uniformity to the language if we were to adopt it of how a person utilizes the sick leave bank. That's the summary of it.
Okay.
Make sense?
Does anyone have questions?
Question.
Okay.
So how does this sit with our recent contract negotiations that we did? Because I know we had some language in there about
It works.
days and stuff. Does it work with this?
I wasn't able to sit, she met with Ms. Bisler, one of the attorneys from Fordsdale, to review this as it syncs with the contract, and that really comes from the concerns probably from your group, as well as the concerns from the associations when this legislation was introduced. My thought is it's supported to integrate some of this flexibility. The organizations and many of the district leaders wanted to do that through the negotiation process to be managed at the district level. Whereas we define family sick time or mental health day or whatever, we do that through a contract. So it's not that there wasn't support for the changes embedded in this in this policy. It was about the way that we would be able to implement it. So this law takes away anything that we would have been able to negotiate or implement through the contract. So moral of the story is we have some of this stuff in place already, like family sick time. We just lost the ability to, in future negotiations,
Correct.
maybe have
Say no.
any of the 10 days family
Say
sick
no.
time or mental health time or whatever. So, but Ms. Christie had an extensive conversation with Mr. Disler. I had another meeting at the time, so I couldn't attend it.
That's
so
what she
she
came
was
in,
working.
that's what she came to my office after, so she sat with the attorney to make sure it meshed within the confines of our contract, which was your question. And, you know, a lot of my, colleagues, their concern was not to give, you're absolutely right, it wasn't about giving anybody time, everybody's due their time. It's about the record-keeping process and how it works and what it looks like. Ms. Christie was very concerned in the beginning, she is no longer very concerned, she said, we will make it work. And she's gonna be able to make it work, and she's already moved forward, and after meeting with the attorney, she felt confident that it will work within the confines of the contract.
So in the regulation, we have choices we have to make?
Yeah, that's what I was looking
So
at.
what are we,
Okay, so we go to the regulation.
what are we choosing? So I'm in the regulation, in section C, starts with position certificate required for sick leave, in case of sick leave, blah, blah, blah. The next page is actually page 4 of a
4 of 8.
so option 1, employee needs to use sick leave as defined in NJSA 18A30-1, and B, above foreseeable, the board may require
Yes,
advance notice not to exceed 7
That's the one we
days.
picked.
Option 2, foreseeable,
Mhm.
that's, the employee shall make a reasonable effort to schedule. So you said option,
Option 2 is our selection.
option 1.
I apologize, let me say it. Number 2, option 2. Does that help?
Option 2, okay, so you like the language
Oh,
of make
yes,
a
yes.
reasonable effort to schedule the use of sick time.
Yes.
So what are we defining reasonable as?
Well, as it is now. So for example, just to give you examples, we have right now bereavement. So we have bereavement, and if someone gets, you know, I always say, God forbid, it's a terrible thing, they need additional days. They can right now, even without all of this, write an email or request in person or in writing to the superintendent to request to extend that, and the answer could be yes. Right now, we have in our verbiage about absence, put in for a personal day before, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, before or after a holiday does not automatically grant that it would be approved. So let's say they have personal days, they're not claiming they're sick, they're personal days, they want extended vacation. If the immediate supervisor says no, which is their right, they can then go to the superintendent. So this verbiage works with us because that's the way we do it now. And we really, knock wood, do not really have abuse. Our attendance is, we have good attendance.
So
We're
the
lucky.
difference between option 2 and option 3 seems to be that on option 3, they would have to give you notice a certain amount of days, whereas the one that we're selecting, you don't have to, it just says advance notice, but it's not specific.
Correct, correct.
So that's the difference
You
between,
know what, I think that's fine.
yeah.
And I think it would be more amenable, and I think it would be more well-received
Mhm.
by our teachers.
What option did you choose for number 3?
I chose, okay, for number 3, I turned the page, because these numbers are terrible.
Yeah.
So I chose
So there's
3,
option 1 and option 2.
I chose option 2, 3, option 2, so it's the very first one on page 5.
As soon as practicable. Notice practicable? Practicable.
It's actually a word.
And I know,
Able to be done.
The difference is may require on option 1 to requires on option 2.
Correct.
Okay.
okay, I like that.
Mhm.
And there are-
You know, in God forbid you have a tragedy, no one's interested in getting you a note, nor should they be. Well, humans first, always, people first,
I would
always.
ask for-
No, but you see, my point is that's why they do it that way, and then, you know, whatever the situation is, so that's, yes, that's the one I got.
Did we pick a percentage for
Yes, we did.
section D6?
Yes, you ready? Okay, let's turn the page. So we are now on page 6 of 8, we are under D.
Yep.
So we picked 51% because we wanted to be more than 50, so more than half. Any employee who's absent for 51% of their workday shall be charged a full sick day if the employee's reason for absence is covered. So it wasn't always 51% because we've had this conversation, you as an elementary principal and middle school principal, wasn't it like 11, 12, 10, remember the hours? 11,
This has to
10.
do with the 4-hour session.
Right, correct. So now it's just 51%, which makes sense. If you're gone for more than 50% of the day, it's a half day,
Mhm.
which is just logical to me.
But it says here shall be a full day, full charge of full sick day.
Oh, that's what I meant,
Yeah,
right.
okay. And there's nothing else to select, right?
I have no more questions.
Anyone else?
That's forward. No.
Are we ready to move on to the school threat assessment?
Yeah.
So this is mandated
Mhm.
and new. Okay. And this goes into effect September 1st, 2023. And again, it's to do with guidance that was published on July 19th, 2023. And I know you've discussed
Mhm.
this, we have it in place.
Ahead of the game.
Yes, ahead of the game, which is good to know.
Yeah.
So
So-
let's see, what are the changes, anything?
So
Is this just the addition of all the stuff that we finally got from the Department of Education?
Yes, yeah.
So they finally came up with.
They finally,
This is it.
They removed, right,
It's not what we discussed.
so we were ahead of the game, as we always, most things that are coming from the state. We tend to do it before the state
So
requires
it's just a matter of adopting this regulation.
it. And now it's
Now
making
the
sure, so we
policy.
did it right.
Now this is the regulation with the information.
And we utilize their language because it's mandatory, so whatever language, remember, it's student versus pupil, just in general.
Whatever.
So when they mandated, if they change one word,
Yeah.
we take one word because it's mandated, that's it. And that comes directly from Strauss Esme.
also Strauss has mentioned that if we wanted to, we could make a motion not to have a second read on these two.
Oh.
That would be up to the board. It says,
We'd have to bring
a
that up.
board has the option to suspend bylaw 0131 that requires 2 meetings to adopt a new policy and or regulation and adopt these documents at 1 meeting with a motion, such as move the Board of Education suspend bylaw 0131 and adopt new policy 1642.01 and regulation 1642.01 and revise policy 2419.
Since you are the acting chair of this committee, I would like to recommend that you make that motion.
Meeting, you do that next week.
Is that something we want to
Yes.
do, or do we think that maybe the sick leave policy needs 2 reads?
That's what's gonna change about it.
Right.
It's another,
And the reason why I like this also is because, you know, to no one's fault, the dates are the dates. So
Yeah.
we're meeting August
So it'll be
16th, we
ready
don't meet
September
again until
1st.
September. The
Right.
children are coming into the building. We've done our due diligence, we've done, Dr. Lehman, we've done what we need to do with both the threat assessment. We're adopting it, we're following it. Even the attendance policy follows what the contract follows. Why would we want to hit the ground
Okay.
running on September 1?
but here's the thing. It's only 3 of us on the board and sitting on this committee. If the committee wants to have 2 reads, if the board as a whole wants to have 2 reads,
they'll say no.
your motion will get
Denied, and then we'll have the second read.
Have a second read in September, and it doesn't go into place until then.
So it's a win-win.
All right, so I will make that motion.
Okay,
Thank you.
right, okay.
Okay, moving right along, grading system. So we had a discussion about this in curriculum. And the discussion was to change the weight of the final exam from 16% to 12%. And increase the marking period percentages from 21% to 22%. Correct.
Well, I didn't hear that part. How did I miss?
Yeah,
That
just
makes
all
up
the
the
numbers.
difference.
You have to do something with points.
Yeah.
So if you take away 4 points, where do they go? Each one gets a point. That's how you have
It has
to
to
do it.
equal 100.
It has to equal 100.
I guess it has to.
So it's
Talking
even.
percentages, it's gotta equal 100, all right.
You know, it's also,
Give them
you know,
all 4 points to start, like, just.
Wouldn't that be great?
and this doesn't stop the discussion in any way. If
No, no.
we choose to move forward with this, it doesn't stop the discussion that we need to look at how we do our final exams. Why, you know, our numbers and how we can improve the, scores. I mean,
This just gives us.
so it
an
just gives
opportunity
us
for
something
this.
to get this going and see how it goes and then continue the discussion throughout the school year. Any questions
So my,
or comments?
I'm gonna say the same thing. So my only question was, and, this is something that I have spoken with months and months ago with Dr. Higgins and asked him to take this on. It was very important to me. I felt looking at the data that it wasn't appropriate. And I think what happened for 20 years is we got rid of midterms, once you got rid of midterms, we standard them together, but it wasn't helping children. I was leaning a little bit more towards the 8% because my attitude was it's 16%, just divided in half. But according to what he's saying, and I didn't do the numbers, but according to what he's saying, the 12% would allow someone to help their grade and not hurt someone's grade. He's claiming, or he's stating, or he's respectful, he's stating that when he did the numbers, if a child who had an A going into the final exam, then failed with a decent what's, I mean, well, got a 60, let's say got a 70, not failed, got a 70, that 70% would not move that child out of an A. That child would still remain with an A. If I don't know the numbers well enough, I don't know if you want to speak on it. My only concern would be, I think final exams have value, but they should not be the end all be all, and you work hard all year long. And we are gonna look at what that means. What does that mean, working hard? What is grading?
Doing your homework.
Doing the homework, what does that mean?
Participation.
I am very uncomfortable as an educator and as a parent, so you have a straight A, a solid A, and you have a very bad day. It happens. Or the test format is very different than the way you've been tested all year, which we're gonna discuss, and now you have a B. I think that's extremely unfair, so I guess the question is, he's stating based on his calculation, it would not drop to a B, and I know that you had some conversations with us, I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have it depends on where you are. If you have a 99, you probably don't go down under the 90.
And if you had a
If you're at a
90,
91,
You don't have to take the test.
91, it doesn't take much to go into the 80s.
Oh, yeah,
Now that
15.
you're a junior,
and is that a rule in the state?
that's part of our policy.
See, that's something I think we should also look at. Because if you have an A, if you have a solid A, whether you're a junior, but you're taking senior classes, why shouldn't you be given the same opportunity to not take your finals, just like you would as a senior? I'm just having conversations, because
Well, that was what
and that's what you brought up.
I brought up and nobody.
That's something we can,
Yeah, I think that should be part of the conversation of grading. I do think we need to make a change, whether we go with this because it's better than what it is, but I think it's something that we need to revisit sooner rather than later, because it does affect children. And I do think if you are taking a senior level course, and we have some sophomores and juniors that do so, definitely juniors on sophomores, I think, I'm not sure, then why aren't you exempt?
And I have to say what's a senior level course.
Right.
Oh, well, some of the classes they take in
It
math.
all depends on where the person's at, right? So if they're, and I agree with you, I think on the premise, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but, the classes, like, there are kids that come into the 8th grade and they're taking AP honors calculus, right? I couldn't have taken that as a senior.
Well, some of them finished geometry in our school, in the middle school.
Right, so, yeah, so there's some kids that are coming in, they've already had geometry, they're now going into algebra 2.
Mhm.
And then, with algebra 2, if you go the standard route or the general route you wouldn't hit algebra 2 until your sophomore year. Or even your.
third
Junior
year,
year.
junior year.
Junior year, right.
Because you.
So, I mean, I think for purposes of our committee right now is the recommendation to approve it to the 12%.
Was that your recommendation or your recommendation 8%?
Well, the problem is my recommendation, I was just going
Can I
with the
just, before you say eight,
Yes.
when I
Did you get
asked, because I did ask him this
Oh,
question,
good.
he said 27 children failed because
Okay.
of the final, but 22 passed because of the
So
final.
you finally need
So
for
it's
some
the- I
people,
think maybe that's where the 12%
Maybe
is
I-
coming from, because it's gonna help those kids that need the boost.
right? So I think
We're
I,
almost even, 27 and
That's a bigger conversation of, should it be a final exam that helps the kids grade?
or her
It should-
kids grade.
It should be, what are we doing as a teacher, as a guidance counselor, as VPs, to help identify the students that are failing going into a final exam and making them successful before that? When are we getting parents involved to say your child's in jeopardy of failing? Because we got several emails
Oh, I got them too.
on graduation day saying that I had no idea my child was failing, my child failed, and now they can't even walk in graduation. So what are we doing to help our students succeed prior to failing a course?
So under,
Where's the intervention?
Yeah, so she just found it.
yeah, because I was reading this and I
Page
was
2 of 9.
thinking this myself from my own experience. So they don't really let you
2 of
know,
9.
you don't really get an email unless you check your child's grades, weekly. You won't get an email from the teacher till midterm, saying your child is in danger of failing, this is the current grade, this is what they need to get to improve. And that's in our regulation,
Which can be
under
changed as well.
section C, number 2.
Yeah, I think
Pupils
that's-
will get, yeah.
Okay.
But the midterm grades at the midpoint of each marking period at the high school level. So
Oh, so
the
technical.
marking, so that's,
That's-
we're reading the whole language here. Is pupils will be given notice of their midterm grades at a midpoint of each marking
Yes,
period.
each
at the high school
marking
level.
period.
So a marking period is how many weeks?
Yes.
10. So at week 5
You
of
should
every
get a-
marking period, you should be getting an email.
So
So
if your child is.
if your child is failing.
Mhm.
So how do we monitor that that is happening? Because I have heard from parents
Oh, yeah.
that they never received an email from their teacher that their child was failing. Now, I have no way to validate that because I can't access that. So how are we monitoring that teachers are actually doing?
So what we can do is, since the email, they utilize the email through Genesis, and the responsibility is on the parent. So if you get an alert through your email that you have an email on Genesis, I would assume, is that correct?
you
It
don't.
comes into your email. Well, in my experience, it's come right into my personal
It
email.
comes right to your personal email, so the responsibility would be on that. What I would like to do, and it's something that I implemented in my old school district in a different state, and I did it actually here in the middle school, and I didn't get any pushback. In addition to the formal email that comes through Genesis, there has to be one additional form of communication. I did this in the middle school, to alert the parent to the problem. That communication can be, you pick up the phone, That communication could be an email, that communication for a lot of parents that do the text with the teacher, like it used to be Ask FM or whatever it's called, group, there's another name for it.
Dojo.
Yeah,
Reminders.
So it would be in addition, a lot of the comments that I've heard, and I'm only sharing the comments I've heard, which if they are true, I am in agreement with the parent, is by the time I was notified, it was too late. The responsibility, I understand it's responsibility as a parent, but there has to be some give and take. I work for a living, I don't sit all day looking at my child's grades. So I think that if we were to look at the regulation and implement, in addition to letter generated by, be specific, letter generated by Genesis, another form of communication must occur. Because what's happening is, I didn't even think it was this, I thought it was only parents that reached out to me that were upset told me they didn't get notified until after midterms, not the midterm of the
Midpoint
period,
of each
the
month.
midterm.
So this sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is like this piece, the second, each marking period needs to sort of maybe the next staff meeting, I don't know,
Yes.
you know, just be reminded that that's what.
Well, we can
maybe-
discuss that in
maybe
our summer administrative workshop.
Maybe
Principals.
adding to this that if they failed the first marking period, a communication directly to the parent needs to happen.
Yes, I am, and I'm very comfortable with that, and the reason why
However you want to make that communication, whether it be text message or whatever, hey, did you know that Johnny failed? You know, I sent you an email mid-semester,
Right.
5.
But now he's failed.
He's failing, now he has failed the
The
marking
first one
period.
of the marking period.
Are you aware of that?
And what I did was, rather than make it policy, I love the word procedure, so as the principal of the middle school, my procedure was, because it was COVID, I was very concerned.
Yeah, no,
So it was during COVID, so I said, nobody fails unless you have to do this and do this. Because parents, it was a tough time for everybody.
yeah, right. No,
So I think that we could definitely look at regulation. My only concern is I don't feel comfortable speaking on the, and I'm gonna have to acquiesce to Dr. Lehman because she's part of the conversation. I don't feel comfortable speaking on the 8 or the 12 because I don't understand the difference in the weight. You were part of the conversation with Dr.
Yeah,
Lehman, with
and-
Dr. Higgins.
And the data he shared is the data we spoke to tonight in terms of the 12% represented, you know, if you got a 0, it would be equivalent to a letter grade. If you got a 50, it would be equivalent to half of a letter grade.
Okay.
Again, it depends. If you have a 95, a letter grade change.
It won't change.
95 to 85, right?
300 failed final exams. You want to make that 12% of those kids' grades. I don't,
Some of those kids though, in like senior year, they check out once they get
They
there
don't,
in
they don't
college.
need them.
They're, you
I
know,
wish
so
we
you
could have to mark the data
may
better.
have to filter that out a little bit. Because they already got into college.
But that was of all
failed.
kids who took finals, that
Yeah.
wasn't just seniors, right? That was
Yeah.
all kids who took finals. So
Yeah.
2,300 failed.
There's only 30, how many kids?
I would like to know I would like to see a split out, how many were seniors, how many were
Yeah.
juniors? Because it was mostly seniors,
They check out.
senioritis, they're done,
Yeah.
they're checked out. I'd want to say that that's,
I don't think that's true. If you
It
have,
depends on the child.
Yeah.
that's not the child, but I want to see
I
that. I
don't
want to
think
see
the
that.
norm
My
would
children
be,
die.
I don't think the norm would be, I'm in college, I'm gonna check out because you
It
have.
is, I'm telling you, there are sociology studies, and correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong. There are sociology studies out there that show that.
Really? Yes.
You've also eliminated a big chunk of your population that would skew your data, meaning all of the students that
Don't need the grade.
you would project to do very well on the final are not taking it. So that, what that does is that creates almost like a bias in the data that leans more towards underperformance. I think that there is some truth to the fact that kids, as a former high school teacher, I can tell you right now, I remember like having joking conversations with students and said, Meralda, I figured out I could get a 16 on your
Yeah.
final and still get a B for the marking period.
Mhm.
And I would say,
I
well,
guess I have
good
over
for you. I said, that's probably the most work you did all week.
We have over-
But figure out that calculation. But I think that, I will say that those things are happening. However, I would then kick it back to a standard of practice. And I think the larger conversation that we alluded to at curriculum committee is more about assessment design.
Is the
Assessment,
test
authenticity.
testing the correct information? Like, that's why I asked when they revised their, because a lot of the issues do happen in math
And
and
yeah,
science.
and when we had the conversation as a team, admittedly, I found that my perspective on the argument was much different than my colleagues because the overwhelming majority of our final exams, and even speaking with Mr. Snyder in my former department, are performance-based.
As they
And-
should be.
And in many instances, like I use woodshop as an example, the fourth marking period is a culmination of skills. right? And particularly a project-based, and usually that final exam is an assessment of the culmination of skills.
What they can make in,
And
what
it
mark,
feels-
and what they can make in the first marking period
Right,
is very
and
different.
it feels like a summative assessment for the fourth marking period that just happens to carry a lot of weight. Now, that's just in a very nuanced area of curriculum. So it is a challenging, from my perspective, I would be in the camp, just selfishly at my department, I'm in the camp of, I would be hard pressed to know that if one project tells the entire tale of a student's ability to improve in woodshop.
And I think that's the percentage, so I feel, and I wish I had more substantial, and we wanted to push it along only because we want the children to know where they're going in September. And we have to push it to September meeting, because I'm not a mathematical person, so I'm very simple. There's 16%, we're concerned with its value, we're concerned with what its grades, we're concerned with what it tests, let's go to 8. That's just like off the top of my head, that's how I do things. Half of 16 is 8, let's move forward. I don't want to be disrespectful to, he worked with a team of people, I was not part of that team, I did reach out to him on more than one occasion, he definitely reciprocated it in his conversations with me, but I wasn't into the nitty gritty. So we can do one of two things. We can have a recommendation to change it to 12 because it's better than this, and let it be brought up again. Because no one says you can't change the policy twice. I mean, or we can table it and have the conversation again, where I would be more intimately involved with Dr. Lehman as well. And because I need someone to show me the numbers, because you said something very telling. If you are, and I always go to English, if you're an English teacher and all of your grades are a compilation of various different factors that include writing and performance and giving a speech and creating questions at a high level using Bloom or Costas, if you're Avid, or whatever you're doing, and you do nothing with multiple choice and your final exam is multiple choice, that's a problem. And I'm not saying this happened. I'm not saying this happened.
And I hear what you're saying.
The other issue is that final exams are traditionally offered in semester-based classes. You're talking about a calendar year. And this is why.
I'd like to give the test to some of the teachers.
This is why you're starting to see, and again, I have a different perspective. But the other thing that I think you had alluded to before, as I can affirm that the exemption of A students from final exams was not always only limited to seniors. And I
Is
can
that
say
correct?
this because as a student, as a graduate of the high
I didn't know
school
that.
in 2000, there was a point in time when
There you go.
underclassmen could get exempt. Now, that was old Monroe, but that was not always.
Oh, New Monroe is not that new.
We are much smaller back then.
So
I know.
I'd love to know the history as to why did we leave it, not why, because here's my take, right? As a student, if I've worked my tail off all year and I've earned an A and I got an A, I don't need to take the final exam. I have proven all
I agree.
along
I
that
agree.
I am competent and I have met the practice.
That was in place when I started in 2007, so I don't know when.
And so why stress me out with a
And,
final exam that I don't need to take? Go ahead, Ann.
and if you have that
29.
incentive there, you
Work harder and you work harder.
Right, yes.
Instead of-
It was
I
the
only
ultimate, as an
Yes,
underclassman, it was the ultimate
opposite.
payoff. I mean,
I get a 9,
if
get
you
a-
earned a grade, again, now we're getting into curricular discussion again.
Yes.
Because this is
Well,
something
everything,
that.
it definitely is in isolation. This
Yeah,
is stuff
but
that-
this is, one of the other elements that came up, and this is, I think, important when you talk about the weighting. Not all final exams are created equal, and there's no way that they can be. Many final exams in the practical and performing arts are going to be demonstrative and cannot take place in 1-2 hour in whatever we do. What was it, 2.5 hours?
Performance-based or whatever.
There's just no way to do that. So many instances, and I know that this is an issue and we've discussed it, but there's no way around it. Many final exams are not limited to the final exam period as allocated by the high school. And in some instances, in my opinion, as content area supervisor, it should not be. If we're talking about a project that is a complete comprehensive demonstration of skills and transferable abilities, I don't know how you demonstrate that in 2.5 hours in the practical arts specifically. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about math or language arts before I get ambushed tomorrow morning. So for example, I don't care about that. But for example, we have many final exams that are production-based. Video production is an example. If I was to assess my top video production students in a 100-question multiple choice test, I would be willing to bet our top students would not do very well on that exam, nor would I expect them to, nor would I care if they did. I'm more interested in transferable skills as content area supervisor, and I know our teachers are as well. But this is a byproduct of the rapid evolution of our programs and growth, and we're still trying to keep it in a box.
I hear you, I took.
But I would caution, and unfortunately, when it comes to policy, it does blanket everything. This is a very complicated issue because all of our departments are so different. And the finals mean a lot more to different departments than they do to certain, departments. But I will say, and I voiced this publicly at our meeting, in the practical arts, with the exception of some of the engineering courses, the final exam feels like a fourth marking period assessment. And, I don't know if that's.
Well, you brought up the example of,
Yeah.
you know, in the woodshop class, you don't have the time to construct that project that represents the culmination of the knowledge.
And I wouldn't
Right.
I wouldn't ask him to go back and make a multiple choice test.
Correct.
On vocab, I just, you know.
Yeah,
So
because kids that are there probably are there because they don't like to take tests or read or.
And it's
Yeah,
just
Maybe they
not,
excel, they
it's not gonna
excel.
tell me if you can construct something, if you can
Right.
memorize a vocab term. I need to see it
See that you could put
done,
to use.
you know?
Mhm.
And in general, though, let's be honest, all the jobs that we have, we go to our resources. If you're a nurse, or you're a doctor, or you're a teacher, I don't say, wait, I know that off the top of my head. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I go to my resource. Like, I'm a big proponent of open book tests. People think I'm crazy. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of open books because this is how I feel. If we're truly about the levels of learning,
Yeah.
and rote is the least, and synthesis and evaluation is the highest, I'm a big Bloom girl, so when you go on this taxonomy, anybody that has prepared, let me say it backwards, anybody who has not prepared and has not truly gotten an understanding of the conceptualization of the information, even with the answers in front of them, will not be successful in the test.
Bingo.
So
You're
I'm a big
absolutely right.
open book person.
You're
For that
absolutely
reason, and I brought it up and it wasn't favorably, so we kind of went to the wayside conversation. I think that's so valuable. So could you imagine what that would do for children? And then even a sliding scale, because if your child learns in different ways, and we teach them in different ways, we say we differentiate, but then we give everybody a bubble
Same
test.
test.
Well, look no further than the nature of college admissions. You know, it used to be what's your SAT, what's your GPA. We've moved so far beyond that. Now it's artifacts, it's portfolio. I want to see things that you've created.
What you've done.
Your essay, what are you,
Um,
who are you as a person?
And I think that speaks to the natural evolution of those style of assessment mechanisms at all levels, college and high school. And again, my personal opinion, this is more of a discussion about assessment design.
Right.
My other personal opinion is that the weighting was too high.
Way too
You know,
high.
and, I think that we know why, because of the whole history of the midterms and stuff like that, why that
They
happened.
just added them together.
Yeah, no, and I think that we're uncovering it.
Oh, they were 10 and 10.
Yeah, so it was,
Think of the regulation
Yeah.
and.
Moving forward to make a
another
decision.
great Discussion, I think. I would like to give the benefit of the doubt to Dr. Higgins, Dr.
Okay.
Kevin Higgins, and go from
With the
from
12.
this committee with the 12 and the 22,
Mhm.
because I have to believe that he did his due diligence with figuring out that this was, because I think that this will not hurt as bad the person who's already failing or already on the cusp of failing, but the 12% could really help somebody who is on that cusp of not passing, but really, tried their hardest. And then we can take a look at this again at the end of the year and see the stats
Yeah.
next year. Unfortunately, we can't.
Like, honestly, this should be a conversation that should probably be confirmed by April or May, because we want to be able to put it in effect and not have this, like, now I don't want to say rushing it, but September is around the corner. We want the children to know. So I'm okay with the 12% because I feel very strongly it's not going to remain.
Right.
Not the percentage, I'm not even worried about the percentage.
Right.
The
this
way
whole
we do
way we
things
do this
cannot
is
remain.
Right.
So I'm comfortable because it's a move in the right direction.
Right.
It respects the work that they did, but now allows us to have that next conversation, whether it be about open book format, because ELA should look nothing like math, and we know that.
I just like the idea of, I think about, and I've been out of the classroom now for 8 years, so.
I won't say how long I've been
I
out of this.
preface that, but, a lot of times also, that month of June is just final prep. And again, I don't want to speak I'm speaking my experience. I know I did it. I spent a lot of time preparing my students for the finals. Don't forget, my seniors were exempt.
Mhm.
So again, what are they doing?
Well, the exempt conversation
And then we're alternative assessments for our exempt seniors. And we're trying to get our students prepped for an exam that may or may not tell the story. I personally, my opinion, I like June learning, for preparation for transition and for what's next.
Could you imagine?
I hated exam prep in my instructional time.
I don't know, Dr. Lehman, if you want to just chime in before we're done with the percentages and with your
Yes,
opinion.
sure.
I think-
My friend.
I think we we heard the plan or the framework of what the conversations will be this year about looking at the core that we're talking about.
Mhm.
Talk about whether it's assessment design, we'll talk about early identification or warning systems, right? For students in trouble, right?
Yes.
Struggling.
Oh, yeah,
More communication.
yes.
And then we already have, so you've heard us talk about MTSS, multi-tier systems support,
Right.
we've approved AIR, we worked with AIR. The high school has some focus this year, just like it did last year, of building that MTSS system, which identifies students struggling. And we can trigger early indicators, we have to identify what those are, outside of a teacher sending an email, right? We're talking about what data triggers us to what's an early signal of someone potentially struggling, what assessments, what benchmarks, what progress monitoring tools. So, and we have those things in place. And actually, he mentioned we have a cadre or a selection of data now that we can look at and cross-reference. Like, this is one data point. We can sync it up with other things, whether it's class grades, formative assessment, summative assessments, state testing, whatever it is.
Benchmarks for the low grades.
Right.
It's been a nice catalyst for some good discussion.
No, it's very
And-
important,
and
yeah.
Again, much like the one we had about the digital ticketing, you know, these are things that I think now that we're moving on them, my gut would tell me we'll be revisiting this policy.
Mhm.
No, I agree.
But I like the
it's
idea
better than
that
nothing.
we've got, like Dr. Lehman said, particularly, we have a lot of things that are already moving, that were inevitably leading us to this discussion anyway, particularly about how we are assessing. But I think what you said about communicating is something that I know as administrative team with the parents, you know, is we really want to make a standard of practice now, is not using Genesis, not saying, well, Genesis is
Not
there, they
enough,
see.
Yeah.
And I admittedly fell into that trap as a teacher as well, because it was a new way of doing it. And I think though, we continue, like you said, at our administrative meetings, just try to really, you know, integrate that it's not enough to report out on a number grade, and we need to start to direct.
I think you have a summer administrative workshop coming up, and one of the things I started in my last leadership meeting is I am not about compliance. Compliance is, I checked the box and I did what we need to do, whether it's embracing, embracing holidays, ones that we don't, not out of school for, and we are currently in school. What does it mean? I don't want that compliance. You know, the state says you have to cover this, this, or that. So, you know, here's my lesson plan, it's compliance. No, it's about, if we as leaders show the passion and that the buy-in, then our teachers as instructional leaders, because we're the instructional leaders and then they're the instructional leaders and teacher of the children rather,
Right.
they'll do the same thing. And this is an excellent conversation we could do in summer administrative workshop, talking about, you know, communication, what does that mean? Parents, children are adults, I get that, but the parents are still our partners in education. Saying that we put it in Genesis and that they could have looked is not good enough. We have to do better. It's
So then
unacceptable.
that takes the responsibility off of us and puts it on somebody else. And we have some culpability and some accountability for responsible to make sure that our students are getting the best that they need. And their first line of defense and their first line of support is the parental unit.
I agree.
And it's very presumptuous that everyone is in a functioning household that would,
Bingo.
you know, and, you know,
And people live in different ways and prioritize, and, you know, we have people that, you know, they work tremendous amount of hours, and what better would be if they got a text all of a sudden or a quick phone call? I can't speak to you right now, but what it is about, and they say, well, I really need to talk to you about your child. Think about the difference between that and saying, well, I put it in Genesis.
I think we also need to accept the fact that many people in our community are not limited to the Western hemisphere, 9 to 5 Eastern time work
Correct.
hour. And that's something that I know as a young teacher became quickly available. Many of our parents work European or Asian hours. And we have to evolve in our communication mechanisms to evolve. to the
Accommodate the
kind-
hours that are.
Learning community, and this is something even I've learned this summer, is that a lot of our parents that working over the summer can only do business at odd times. And I'm not saying we're asking our teachers to do that, but I just think we
Yeah.
need to be more mindful of our communication channels.
No, I agree. So I think it was a good conversation. I think we're gonna move it forward if the committee agrees at the 12%, knowing that it's still not good enough, because we have to say, what does it mean? But it's a step in the right direction. I think it's a continued conversation. I am gonna ask,
We want to add.
well, can we add now the communication? Can we change the regulation? Because that we could do right now. Is that how it works?
No, I think we should have a conversation with them.
Well, that regulation Well, I have to tell you, it's a
That's what the
standard,
committee's for. I mean, we can't have a conversation with everybody.
just so you know, it is
I think
standard
that we
practice
should add
in
that.
many schools.
I think we should add that.
This is the high
What do
school.
you want to add specifically?
It should be, at the end of the monkey period, if the child has failed.
At the end?
Well, I like what she said, so if they're following the rules, right here, midway of the marking period, 5 weeks in, the child is in danger of failing, there's a letter that's generated
Genesis.
through Genesis, and that's okay. You've heard nothing, the parent has not had, there has been no communication, some teachers go above and beyond and call 3 times, some teachers say, I met the regulation, I'm done, but then you put in the statement that at the end of the marking period, any child who fails, there will be communication in addition to Genesis communication. What does it mean?
It should be a letter, a formal letter home, mailed to.
I almost like the phone, I'm concerned about the letter, because then the child gets the letter, I don't know if the parent gets the letter.
And one more thing, Dr. Maralda, you can't respond to these emails, correct? Like if you hit reply, I don't think the teacher sees it.
Admittedly, I'm not familiar with
But I
that
think that's an
function.
issue.
No, I
Like,
don't
if
know.
you hit reply, I don't
Does it
think
come
the
from
teacher
Jeff?
sees
Is it
it.
automator?
It's
Yeah.
a non-
Yeah,
it's not
so
applies.
maybe
You wanna-
parents are replying, and they think the teacher read it.
So maybe we really need to look at,
It should be a letter through Genesis, having a
No.
letter.
no, well, they currently is a letter through Genesis right now. But this is my question, the letter through Genesis, does it populate in your regular email?
It does, but I'm not sure if you hit
It comes
reply,
from
if it goes to
Genesis
the
Is
teacher's.
the Genesis email automated? I don't, oh, so it's like, because so if the kid fails, does the email automatically go out, or is it, we have to
No.
manually do it?
It's manually.
I have to tell you,
The pupil will be
The
given,
timing of those hoots are incredible.
so people will be given pupils will be given notice of their midterm grades, so it should say parents.
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 oh,
will
that's
be-
another thing here, it doesn't
Right.
even say
It
parents,
said pupils,
pupils.
so it should say parents.
Good catch. I didn't even catch that.
Parents will be given notice of their students,
Mm-hmm.
their child,
Their child, student, yeah, that's how it's student, their child.
child's midterm grades at midpoint of each marking period at the high school level through.
An email, a
A
letter, a
direct
direct email letter, what do you call the
Doesn't say here.
Through a direct communication.
communication?
Okay.
If you put Genesis in there.
I like
you go to
direct
public
communication,
schools, You know what I mean?
and you wanna go by phone, there's nothing wrong with something in the phone.
Not through Genesis.
So direct
A
communication,
direct communication.
including but not limited, let me put it in legalese, including but not limited to.
I don't
Blah,
have,
blah,
like,
blah,
if you're gonna.
No, I'm gonna take care of it.
All right.
I'm gonna give it to the top.
Parents.
No,
All right, so we're gonna move this forward to.
I like that, and then the 12%, it's something, we're moving in the right direction.
Did we want to say any student with a 90 or above is exempt? Or?
Well, I would love to see the history of that, where does that come
We
from?
need some data.
I don't
Yeah,
know
that would be, I
anything
mean,
about
that's an existential changer,
Yeah.
of alteration of practice.
No, or,
Yeah.
That would be, I don't, I, you know what, I'm not gonna speak for the high school.
no, I don't think, I think it's good to get input from Dr. from Dr. Higgins,
Mhm.
because I think
Because
they're,
if that's what you're saying, that we have so many failing because they figure out they can get a 16% because they have a 90 or
why,
whatever.
why make them take
That
it?
does
That's
happen.
what I'm saying, why make them take it?
And let them work harder to get the grades, which is more indicative than one test.
And make it across the board. I mean,
Across the board, right?
But they also
Maybe
have to
not.
practice
Maybe
how to
not
take
too.
finals.
Yes,
in preparation
that's
for
the other thing
college.
also, I agree with you. Well, I can only speak of my children's finals are like 70%.
Yeah.
That's the way it
I mean,
works.
it's good practice.
So I mean, I definitely think freshman and sophomore, we're creating good habits for them, having an understanding. But a junior, senior, the reason why
I should look at the freshman biology final,
okay.
because most of them fail that too.
So maybe the data that we got,
I mean, that's
uploaded today.
what we looked at is what classes, what are the historic classes?
In which there's an area.
Failed
We need more data.
Yeah, we need a lot more.
we'll break down that 17%.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Where are the failures? Is there a pattern in the actual failures, in those 2,000 and some odd students that
Which is a
failed?
lot.
Mm-hmm.
Where, you know, is there a common theme?
Mm-hmm.
Not 2,000 students, 2,000 failed tests.
2,000 fail tests.
Oh, right, because if they took more than one.
And how many, what did he say, 20, what was the number he said of how many tests were taken? 11,000.
13,000.
Oh, you wrote it down, I thought it was 11.
So I didn't write it down, but it was 13 something.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah,
think-
I like to slice and dice the data. I like to see the details,
Mhm.
because the devil's in the details.
Well, the
Just
data
for purposes
warehouse.
of data, we're gonna have a very large presentation in September.
Yep.
And we're gonna handle, so just to give us an idea, the presentation will be inclusive of AP scores and,
AP scores, NJSLA scores, those are the ones that are coming out right now. That's what
and do
we
we
have.
have the year previous as well? Because we did not present on that, and it's something we need to do.
It's traditionally embedded in year, like a, for historical data.
Oh, so we'll see it all. Okay, excellent. So the AP scores and maybe we need to have, maybe we
And
need to
that'll
look
be
at
at
final.
curriculum?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Full board
Oh,
meeting.
full board meeting.
Full board meeting. Yeah, and it's gonna be September events.
Okay.
And it'll be AP classes and how many got 5, 6, 5, 4, 3.
That's what the board wants, that's what the board gets.
I think we should, because most colleges won't accept an AP course without a 5 or 6. So I think in assessing our data, right, that's one of our goals. If we are putting out these AP courses, we shouldn't be celebrating you got a 3, because you ain't getting credit in college unless you got really a 5 or 6. Some colleges are only 6s. So I think we should be looking at how our students are performing in these high-level classes and what they're being able to take from here and move along into a college credit.
Right, 'cause
That's why we're taking AP courses, right? To
Not
get-
necessarily.
Yeah.
Some students take it for the challenge.
Mhm.
I had a child, didn't take it. She took
Some
it
people
for
don't
the
take
challenge,
it.
but
I mean,
didn't take it for the
that's
college
fine,
credit. So
but
you
if you're
you
taking
can't
the
assume
test-
things that.
No, but
No, I
if
see.
you're taking the test.
But if you're taking the test, we should report out what the score is.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a final exam, right?
Yes.
You're,
Can't assume that.
if you're not
Yeah.
getting a certain score on the AP, it's why? Was the curriculum not matching what the state?
Or was the child, this was before we started with the, we finally put some parameters on children being able to take certain classes.
Right.
Because we want it to be the children in combination with the parents, but we don't always want to see the parents pushing the children to be in a class they really don't belong in. It has to be that, it's always about
You
balance.
have to have self-studying and.
It's always about balance, so yes,
Well, we have students that self-study for AP tests, so they don't actually take the course, but they sign up and take.
and they take the
exam.
test.
Yeah.
Now, educate, is there any way you could show that data on our presentation?
Not.
No, I was just curious, like they didn't really take the, because that would be, because that's one of those, what do they call you, that skews the data.
Outliers?
Yes, an outlier,
Mhm.
that skews the data.
Yep, and we have, students, specifically avid students that we encourage everyone to
Yes.
take it, so they may just take it for the experience.
And that's okay,
There's a
and,
wide range of students that are taking.
but you know what, the scores are the scores. We can't hide from them, they are what they are, when they're good, and when they need an area, and then perhaps if we did the research after the presentation, and then we look to aggregate and disaggregate the data and say, okay, well, we saw some children only got 3s, but they were our students that we pushed, and we're glad that we pushed them, and we're glad they got a 3. So in other words, we encourage, especially with the AVID program here, which is absolutely true, the AVID program, as you know,
And the program has nothing to do with AP courses.
it's supposed to. In the middle school, we push some of our AVID children to even be in the honors, the accelerated math program. Because one of the things is, one of the AVID indicators is take rigorous curriculum. So they should be, some of them, not all, but some of them, it's almost like I was a reading teacher, whether it's be like, your reading level is instructional, frustrational, independent, same type of thing. So we would push some of those children because there's no harm, no foul to take those tests. But that data you could find because you know who's an AVID child.
I like looking at the AP score versus the marking, the final grade. I think from a pedagogical standpoint, when I'm assessing teachers, I look at, if I see a 5 on the AP exam and a 1, and like a 75 for the marking period.
Or how about if they fail the final and get a 6 on the AP?
That happens more than you think.
That's not scary.
And you'll have kids that get 99s for the year and a 1 on
Crazy,
the
right?
AP exam, because, for example, if we know, Lehigh won't take an AP, even if you get a 5 on an AP micro, Lehigh's not taking it, because they want Lehigh economics.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, they say
So,
it's very true. Yes, I've
so
heard that.
kids know that if they're going to Lehigh, and again, this is very small percentage.
Right.
But you're going to take the AP exam. I also think it's more important to note that our AP exams do not serve as a substitute for a final exam.
Right.
So if you take an AP exam in May, the expectation is that you'll still be taking the final exam at the end of
Unless you have an A and you're a senior.
Correct.
As of today.
And that becomes, I'll be honest with you, it becomes a very interesting, the teachers do a great job of creating creative assessments,
You're
but
allowed. That makes no sense to me. So you
Well,
can take
we
it,
have a policy that we
we
can
can change.
Right.
We can change. So these are really good conversations, so we're gonna make the two changes as of right now in the regulation, not the policy,
And
correct?
it's going to
Policy stays
in
the
the
same.
regulation.
And that'll go for first
First
read in
read.
September, and if we have any other
How about
changes we
August?
wanna
We
bring.
don't wanna make, we're waiting till September for.
Well, can we, are we allowed to fast
Oh,
track this?
this month we could do
We
first
could do
read.
first read.
First read in August, yeah, and then second read in September,
Yes.
but by the time we get to September, we might have some more information.
We may.
Depending upon, because we're all meeting, you know, we're working, and with the summer administrative workshop.
And that's
this is a
great.
good conversation.
You know, it may not need for us to update this, but let's continue to have a monthly report. Well, I'll make it a standing item on the curriculum committee
Okay.
every month. What's the report out on the
monthly
testing and the
basis.
grading? of
On the
where we
regulation,
at?
the grading
Yeah,
regulation,
identify
where are we at? Mhm.
So they,
Where
right,
have you been? You know what,
Sounds
what,
good.
have you- what has your research found? Where, you know, just 5 minutes. I don't need a report like Zach gives. I just need a 5 minute.
I like
well, you
your
didn't let
report.
Zach go through curriculum, so
No,
you
you
gotta
only,
give
you
us time.
only like, I get
I know,
back
I owe
at
you some
30
time in
minutes.
September. Yeah, you don't get 30 minutes.
So we're all set?
We're good, so we're gonna move it forward to that.
We can conclude our meeting?
I
That was our
think so,
meeting for
yeah.
today. Okay.
Thank you.
Could have
Thank
talked
you.
about sixth grade wrestling for now.